RM Sotheby's is the world's largest collector car auction house by total sales. They are the preeminent market maker of high-quality collector cars and collections, regardless of size or complexity. By working in partnership with the Sotheby's team and its network of 80 offices in 40 countries, RM Sotheby's has established the largest client network of any collector car auction house in the world. Join the RM Sotheby's family by connecting with one of their car specialists at rmsotheby's.com or contact me directly at gstanley@rmsotheby's.com.
Welcome to the Collector Car Podcast. I'm excited about this episode because there's a question I get from a lot of you that I honestly can't answer. It's how do I become a car specialist? Now, a reason I can't answer that is because I have a very unique career path to RM Sotheby's, which I will cover at the end of this podcast. So stay tuned if you would like to hear my wacky career path. But I thought, you know what, who's the best person to answer this question? So I'd like to welcome Gord Duff, president of RM Sotheby's, to the podcast. Gord, how you doing, buddy?
Good, good. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate you being on the podcast to talk about this because, everybody thinks it's the dream job. Obviously, there's some really cool stuff about the job, but it is a much harder job than I ever thought it would be. And, it's an interesting job because nobody knows, like, what are the skill sets? There's not a college degree in being a car specialist. And you and I both come from abnormal career paths to end up where we are today. But from an RM perspective, like if you had advice to give someone who's that 12 or 13-year-old car enthusiast who would love to join the ranks of RM one day, like what kind of advice would you give them? Like what's a great, avenue, experience, education that you really look for when you're interviewing candidates?
Let's even say a 25-year-old or a 35-year-old, but the most important thing or kind of the first thing is a passion for the cars and it being something you really enjoy and you're not coming into it because you think you can make a lot of money doing it or you see others that appear to be super successful at it. But one, it's kind of having the passion for the cars. Two, definitely knowledge and the ability to learn, quickly and being able to have a really good memory. I think that's a super important part, whether it's the history of a car, certain years that certain models were built, knowing what a car sold for 5 years ago or what the market was on a car before, what it is now, what it might be in the future, being able to connect dots on who used to own what, who's looking for what. That's a big piece to our business is, we visit clients throughout the year and you're always getting pieces of information of, I might want to sell that in 6 months, or I'm looking for one of these if you ever find one. And the ability to be able to retain that information and be able to connect dots, whether it's a week later, 6 months later, 2 years later, that's the crucial piece. And the people that are out there, colleagues of mine, friends of mine, just in the industry, like the ones that are super successful, that's one of the main ingredients, I think, is having that really good memory and being able to connect dots.
That makes a lot of sense because as I'm doing this in a full-time capacity now, you think about, well, there's an E-type for sale or available privately, and you got to remember, wait, I had a client, 6 months ago that said he'd like to have an E-type or whatever the car may be. That is something I wouldn't have necessarily thought as being super important, but you're right. It's something that you really need to remember who is looking for what, who has what, who might move on. It's part of a larger world, I guess, that you need to keep track of, right?
Yeah, and being able to understand, the type of car that each client is into a different either type of car or quality of car. Some like more driver quality, they like doing rallies, or they just like a great old car, where others are like, I want to go to concourse, so I want perfect stuff, and don't call me if it isn't a perfect car, an original color, or et cetera, et cetera. So there's also, that calibration through it all, as well as to somebody that wants an F40 with miles on it versus the guy that's only buying delivery mileage stuff, or, Shelby Mustang or a Cobra, and they're a show car person, not a, car tour or driver type person. So it's understanding that so that, when you're either trying to consign or sell cars, you build good relationships with these people, and then you're coming to them with cars that are actually fit within their collection or that they're looking for, not just throwing any E-type, as you would say, at them. You're putting one in front of them that's like, hey, this would be good for your collection because of XYZ, or, when you're trying to sell stuff for them, I guess. Works both ways.
Yeah, the other thing I was really surprised by is, you join RM. It's not like, hey, here's your client list, here's the book, you got to find your clients, right? You got to network, you got to meet people, you got to understand who's out there, who's looking, who's selling, who's buying. And so much of it is building these long-lasting relationships, right? In which they trust you, they trust your opinion. It's not like you show up and, hey, here you go, right? I mean, you kind of have to
Yeah.
build your own relationship network.
I always tell people if they're interested in coming to work for us or just in general, they're younger and they're like, hey, someday I'd like to get into this is, getting into it's one thing, getting good at it and great at it is just takes time. I tell a brand new specialist 3 to 5 years until you, one, get comfortable, two, get a, decent client base and you start, being able to consign good cars and sell good cars and kind of get a uh, 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 your own client base together that trusts you. And it's about being honest and being long term, right? Making sure that when you're selling a car to somebody, we sell cars to people over the phone all the time that never see them, and they're going based off me telling them this is a good car for you. And a lot of the time they're like, okay, like they trust me because I've built a relationship with them over a long time. That they'll buy cars sight unseen. But it's it takes a lot of sacrifice as well. You got to be on the road a lot. You got to be willing to go to all these car shows, and that's where it comes back to, you got to love doing this, and you know, kind of you work hard enough, you're going to be successful in this. But some people it comes quicker to than others. But 3 to 5 years is to just kind of start to get comfortable, and then in 10 years you can see it, 15 years you can really start seeing it. It's definitely a long-term play, but you got to give up lots of weekends away with friends and away from your girlfriend or your family, or those kind of things to sacrifice in order to, if you really want to be great at this job.
Yeah, agreed. Now, can you speak a little bit to the Dare to Dream collection? Because if I remember correctly, that was a long-term relationship that you build up personally and help them source the cars for that. Is that correct?
Yeah, there was me and actually a few friends of mine in the industry that had sold him most of his cars. But I kind of met him just randomly on a weekend while I was up in Toronto, and it went from a collection where he had 20 or 30 cars that were 50 to 100 grand a piece to I'll never buy a car for $1 million. And within 2 or 3 years, it kind of he switched, right? He just kind of started getting into the bigger stuff. And yeah, we're still great friends. I go hang out with him in the summer now with his family at his cottage and whatnot. But that was 15 years of kind of, doing the right thing, selling him the right cars, telling him no when he wanted a car and it wasn't good enough for him, or, he was looking to me and, other people in the industry to steer him right. And, I we did, we made sure that he bought the right cars and stayed away from, the ones that weren't up to snuff of what he wanted. But, that's what our business of 40 years is based on, are these relationships that, Rob has had and Shelby has had, and, lots of us that, have been here for 10, 15, 25, 30 years kind of thing.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but wasn't it the blue Daytona that you made sure he went out and got just the right one, which yes, it cost him more money at the time, but then, when it did eventually sell, it also, realized, I don't know that it was a record, but a really strong price because of the quality of the example.
Yeah, I'd say selling it was more luck. I wouldn't have expected it to bring that kind of price. I think it was like $1 million hammer at his auction. But when he wanted it, I was like, it's the right car, but you're going to pay world record money for this car. And when you wake up in the morning, you're going to read stuff about it, and people might say this crazy guy came and bought this car, and other people might tell you the same thing. But it is the best. It is a killer car, and if you want it, you're just going to have to step up. And he did. And surprisingly, I thought it was worth about what he paid for it. This is 10 or 12 years later, and it got into a bidding war between two people at the auction, and lo and behold, I think it hammered at like $1 million or 1,050,000, which if it's not a record, I think it's the second highest price ever paid for a Daytona coupe. So, certain things that he bought, buying the best of the best, you'll always be, okay in the end with.
Right, right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I feel like I probably have some listeners now that are excited because they're like, okay, I've got the passion. I'm ready to go on the road. I'm ready to do this, that, and the other, but they're not necessarily equipped, whether that's from a knowledge basis, education, training. So I know we've had some McPherson College graduates. I
Mhm.
know myself included. I try to judge cars at car shows because I want to increase my knowledge base on certain models, makes and models. What would you recommend has been like maybe the most successful paths? Is that like, hey, you know what? I worked at a luxury dealership that also had classic cars. I know there's a lot of different ways to kind of get your
Yeah.
knowledge base, right?
If I look at people that work for us that are, started when they were 25 years old or started when they were 40 years old, like to be really successful, you're either, you come from maybe a research side of things where you're really knowledgeable on cars so that, coming to work for an auction house, let's say, like, the clientele wants somebody that knows what they're talking about. And, you know, that's a good way for some people. The other side is you got to be a good talker, right? You need to be honest, and you need to have a little bit of salesmanship in you, that you're not scared to go walk up to a stranger, or that you can be an easy person to carry on a conversation with. And you know the knowledge will come in time. I remember a friend of mine when I first got into being a specialist, and I'm going on the road visiting people, and I'm like, I'm going to walk in garages, and I won't know anything about the kind of cars they have. And he was kind of like, just remember, the people you're going to see will always know more about their cars than you will, the histories and that kind of stuff. And you just sit there and listen and soak up as much as you can. And I feel like over the years, every car I've consigned, I really didn't know much about. That was the car that because I consigned it, I learned a ton about, and then it just stuck with me. So then times that by whatever, 20 plus years, and you end up knowing a lot. And I think for younger people, if you can get your foot in the door with auction houses, are great because we sell a little bit of everything. So we sell cars from 1900 to, a modern day SP3. So you get to learn a lot. Whereas if you go into a restoration shop and they only restore E-type Jags, you're just going to get to know E-type Jags. Where, you know, working for an auction house, whether you're a writer, you're a researcher, we've had guys that started, at McPherson where they were working summers for us, or they would work line up at our auctions, and they were good with their hands or knew how to drive things, and they'd come in and help us move cars around and drive them across the block. And they get to know clientele, they get to know a lot about uh, you know hundreds of different kind of cars and how to drive them. And then they kind of figure out their path from there. We've got some people that are researchers and writers for us, and we got three McPherson grads that are car specialists for us now. But they started working in lineup, they started pushing cars around at an auction kind of just like me. So it was like they just they came at it maybe a humble way, and learned as they went. And I don't think any of them thought, maybe initially, like, that's what I want to become when I get older. And it just kind of happened, or they started, their eyes started opening up to all the different possibilities in this industry of, like, all the different directions you can go. But McPherson is a great one, writing for auction houses, or if you can get an internship at a restoration shop just to get your foot in the door. I think anywhere is great to get going, and then you kind of just, you can make three, four, five different moves as you grow in order to get into whether you go work for a dealership or you come work for an auction house or something. But we're one of the best places to learn the most about cars, since we touch so many different kinds of cars throughout, a year.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like I'm not a pre-war guy, but I know more now today than I ever have in my life.
Yeah.
Still hesitant to drive one. I do want to get that training class one day. Okay, no, that's really, really good information. What's the best way for folks to learn more? I know we have like a LinkedIn profile that you can tab onto to see if there's opportunities. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're always looking for great specialists. It's nice if you come with, a bit of background and knowledge of the industry or from, you know, like a restoration shop or something like that. We have trained lots of guys from, the ground up, but you're going to start doing a lot of different stuff before you become a specialist. We're not going to hire any, 22-year-old and you're going to become a specialist right away. I think, with the team that we have, in North America, more so they've come from kind of humble beginnings of doing a lot of other stuff and have just grown over time. And we got a couple of them that are just fantastic, and it's nothing I could have seen 10 years ago of what they'd become today. We had a McPherson grad, and I don't think he ever thought he was going to sell the world's most expensive F50 ever. And that happened, this summer for him, and it's fantastic. And it was a relationship that he built for, several years with the family, and he was, finally able to secure the car and, worked for a company like us with a great brand, and we were able to put a world record price together for him. But it's pretty cool from where he came from, 10 or 12 years ago to today. So it's possible for anybody if you want to put in the time.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. So I'll put links in the description so folks that are listening to this can check out, see what might be available at RM Sotheby's. But before I let you go, two things real quick. Can you give me your thoughts on the Monterey week? Because you just referenced the F50 record price, quite a few record prices happening over the weekend.
Yeah, overall the market was really strong. We had a better auction than I honestly expected we would have. I knew the F50 would do a good price, and I knew the SP3 would be strong, that we sold for charity, not nearly what it brought, but
What was your number on that
overall,
car?
you know, uh, 12 to 15.
Okay, yeah,
That's what was kind of in my head. I knew it was north of 10. I did not believe it would be 20 plus.
right.
Um, Amazing result, amazing that we have such a great relationship with Ferrari. But, across the board, prices were strong, from a Yenko Camaro to a 512 TR to a 599 GTO to, we sold a great Duesenberg and a 500K for really strong money for, pre-war classics. So overall, I was, happily surprised with our results. And, when you looked around, with even all our competitors, everybody had a really good weekend. So, if it's good for all of us, it's good for the market overall, it's good for all of us going forward. So, no, was really happy. I'm relieved it's over. It was a 6 month worth of work, putting all that stuff together, but super happy for the success of, the team and our company and everything and what we achieved a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, yeah, really amazing work. Well, before I let you go, I know I'll cover my not typical career path after we're done, but could you just give our listeners a little insight into your not typical career path? Because I think it's a really fascinating one. What little I know about it.
Uh, yeah, so started almost 27 years ago, did an internship here, like some of my other colleagues have done, since me, but did an internship cleaning cars, started, working our auctions, pushing cars, driving cars across the auction block, got into transporting cars for us. So I drove our transport truck all over the place, like a reliable carrier's truck, really like that. Did some logistics for auctions, setting up venues and whatnot, and then moved into a specialist role, and just kind of wanted to go from consigning 5 cars to 10 cars to 15 cars to my first $1 million car. And it took a lot of time. It doesn't seem that long in the moment, I guess, but like looking back, I'm like, oh, I've been doing this for 15 plus years as a specialist. And, everything I learned from the driving the cars to transporting cars, I got to learn the customers, I got to learn the cars and how to start them all and drive them, and, good ones from bad ones from all of that. So that helped, bring me through to understanding the cars in a better way. And, all the stuff I was learning of the cars I was transporting got me into learning 34 Packards from 37 Hispanos from, name the car. It was all the things I didn't realize I was learning at the time. And it's nothing that I would have ever expected. Like every thing that's kind of happened to me over 27 years, none of it was, you know, one day I want to be this or that kind of thing. It just, I don't know, the next little step happened, and then you look back and it's like, oh, I've taken a lot of steps in 27 years. So
Yeah.
I like the kind of way it came about for me, but it was nothing that I would have ever expected.
Yeah, and I have to say, from my food industry side, I started as a cracker stacker slinging Oreo cookies part-time into grocery stores. And, I made my way up to district manager. And as a manager and as you as the president, in my mind, you have so much more trust and credibility when you started in the trenches. You're not
Mhm.
someone that just kind of came over, because you have an Ivy League degree or something, like you've been here, you've done everything, you've seen everything, you've been a part of everything. And I think that really good for the troops, I guess is the
Yeah.
best way to put it.
Yeah. I wanted to be at the top of the pile for being a specialist and, consign the most stuff and help sell the most stuff. And that's where I thought, the top was, and didn't realize that, there was more to come after that. I didn't expect to be running a company or, managing a lot of people. It was, I like doing the car deals and meeting the clients and that kind of stuff, but it's great. I get to do, both now. So it's yeah, I don't know how it could get any better.
I was about to ask, is this it? You topped out here? You're gonna,
Who knows, right?
who knows, right?
Still got a long road ahead, so we'll see what
Yeah.
happens.
Well, Gord, thank you so much for giving some insight as far as what it takes to be a car specialist in an auction world, especially with one such as RM Sotheby's. I appreciate you being on the podcast.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
Okay, so you've heard from Gord Duff on what it takes to become a car specialist at RM Sotheby's. Now I will share with you my non-traditional career path. I get this question so much. I originally this was going to be the podcast episode. It was going to be how I became a car specialist with RM Sotheby's, but then I realized that probably won't help out most people because it's such a weird career path. So what happened is I've been in the food industry for over 30 years or around 30 years. I'm not that old. Anyways, started when I was like 17, 18. I was working for Nabisco, summers from college. Ended up quitting college after 4 years. I did not graduate, and I started working for Nabisco full time. So long story short, I did the corporate career path in the consumer products goods category. Now, what this means for you is if you are not in the car world, it honestly doesn't matter if you would like to explore a path as a car specialist. And so the reason I say that is because I had it in my head, I would love to be more involved in cars. I just have such a passion for them. As you can tell, after almost 400 episodes of the Collector Car Podcast, I'm doing this for fun. I'm not getting paid. At least when I started it, I wasn't getting paid anything. It's just a passion project. So fast forward to about, 6 years ago or so, I was doing a podcast called Learn from Others, where I would share the career journey of different professions. And the ideal scenario is that it was teenagers were my listeners. So I would share whether you're a doctor. I had the director for Hamilton on. I had the press writer for Ronald Reagan. All sorts of cool stuff. Met a lot of cool people. But I still kind of wanted to have cars involved somehow in this educational podcast for kids. So you can still find it if you go to Learn from Others. It's on Apple, iTunes, that kind of stuff. So at the end of every episode, I would pick, like, what car would a doctor have? What car would the director for Hamilton have? And I would pick something fun, interesting. Could be a classic car, could be a new car, whatever. It was just a fun exercise for me to intertwine collector cars into my podcast. So after a while, it was the guy, I cannot remember his name, but he was the speechwriter for Ronald Reagan. We were having a conversation after the recording, and I forgot how he got on it. But basically, he said, if people were to sum you up in 3 words or less, what would they call you? And I said, oh, that's easy. They would call me the car guy. And he said, well, then you should probably have a car podcast. Now, that sounds brilliant. That sounds really, simple today. But at the time, I was like, you know what? You're probably right. Why am I kind of spinning my wheels doing something that is a passion, but it's not like the overall driving passion of what I do? And so I tried to do both podcasts for a while. I did Learn from Others, and I did the Collector Car Podcast in tandem for a while. It was just too much Learn from others did not take off like I hoped it would. And so I ended up shutting that down. But like I said, I'm still paying $5 a month to keep it active, so you can listen to some of those old episodes. Now, in the meantime, I was a huge Mustang fan. So back when I was 19 years old, I joined the Mustang Club of America. And then eventually, when I became of age where I could actually afford a Mustang, so let's call this mid-30s, I decided I wanted to become a Mustang judge. Because someone once told me, you never know what is wrong with a car until you know what is right with a car. And they said you should become a judge based on whatever car you like. NCRS for Corvettes, Pontiac, I don't know what the name of their club is. But anyway, so I became a Mustang Club of America judge. And that is a really good way to know what you're looking at. And so for a little bit of background, in that world, as well as NCRS, you're focusing on like 1 or 2 years. Maybe in NCRS it's a generation. I'm not sure. You could focus on C2 Corvettes. But you literally learn what is the right hose clamp, what is the right nut, the bolt. You're underneath the undercarriage. You're looking at the brake calipers. You're looking at the kind of tires, the size of tires, everything. So that was a great learning process for me. So fast forward to, 6 years ago or so, I've got the Collector Car podcast up and running. I probably have maybe 60 or 70 interviews recorded. And I just happened to see an article or a job posting on LinkedIn for a car specialist with RM Sotheby's. And I had never been to an RM Sotheby's auction. I had been to Bear Jackson auction in the early 90s once with my sister, but zero experience in the collector car world, zero experience in the auction world. And I just thought, you know what? Probably cocky at the time. I'm like, hey, I'll apply. And they'll offer me this job where I get paid a bunch of money and I get to do fun stuff, right? I was so wrong. So I customized my resume so that it appealed more towards the car world. So I emphasized the Mustang judging. I emphasized the Collector Car podcast. And so I sent the resume in and I didn't hear anything. Zip. Like for months. I didn't hear anything. And so eventually RM Sotheby's had a sale in Dayton, Ohio. So I'm in Cincinnati. If you're from Dayton, they pronounce it Dayton. They said you have to make it sound like your tongue's numb. Dayton. Anyways, and they did the John Dixon collection, which he had passed away. It was an estate sale, a lot of Porsches, a Carrera Speedster, some cool stuff. And so I thought, you know what? I've never been to an RM Sotheby's auction. Why don't I just go in there and see what it's all about? So I show up, and the very first person I see walking by that I actually recognized was Donnie Gold. He was with RM Sotheby's at the time, and I had seen him on Chasing Classic Cars or some TV show, him as the expert. And so I said, hey, Donnie, I submitted a resume and I never heard back. And he kept walking. He immediately pointed to the president of RM Sotheby's at the time and said, go talk to that guy. And so he kept walking. Now, if you ask him today, he takes credit for getting me a job with RM Sotheby's. Anyways, so I talked to the president. He said, hey, you know what? The spam filters probably kicked out your resume. Here's my email address. Send me your resume directly. So I did that, and I didn't hear anything for like 3 months. And then finally I heard from him, and it wasn't a job offer. It was, hey, we're not going to offer you a job, but we really like your podcast. We like the connections you're making, the people you're talking to. So we would like to pick up your podcast as our official podcast, and we would offer you a consulting gig where I could get paid as if I was a car specialist, but I would just do it part-time or as I could. Now, at the time, we also had our Auburn sale. And so I was fortunate. I got a cold call list from Sotheby's, and I started calling around, and I met someone who became a great friend. And he ended up selling 22 cars with me over 2 years at Auburn. And so as I'm doing this consulting gig and working my full-time food job, and doing the podcast for a while, doing both podcasts, obviously I was working a ton of hours. It was just so much. Well, in the meantime, I was able to consign the Ferrari 330 LM/250 GTO that eventually sold for all in at $51.7 million. And so that gave me a little nest egg in which I could say, you know what? I really enjoy doing this. I'm having success as a part-time consultant, and I was able to get this really amazing car in front of RM Sotheby's that they ended up selling for a world record price. Why don't I try to do this full time? And so that's when I I called up Gord, our now president, who you just heard from, and basically said, hey, I want to come on full time. Can you bring me on board? And he graciously agreed to do so, and I've been doing it full time for about a year. So I'm not saying you should start your own podcast. I don't know the answer, but I just thought I would share with you my non-typical career path to end up at my dream job. And it literally started with a podcast. And I cannot stress, you're never too old to try to get into this business. I mean, look at me. I started trying to get my foot into the door when I was, 48, 49 years old. I'm a little bit older than that now. Actually, probably 46. Anyways, so it's been a heck of a ride. I appreciate all of you joining me for such a long time. And if you're new to this and you'd like to be on my newsletter, just shoot me a note, gstanley@rmsotheby's.com or greg@thecollectorcarpodcast.com. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. And I will talk to all of you next week.